This is the Vivo Nex S. It's a next generation smartphone which basically takes smartphone technology to another level. And I'm not just saying that for clickbait, but I really mean it. It's got an edge-to-edge display and a pop-up selfie camera. Now if that's not innovation, I don't know what is. So without further ado, let's go into the in-depth review of this smartphone. Now first of all, you'll be wondering what is its price? Shall I even consider it before I even listen into the review? Well, you should listen in anyway, but in terms of price, well, it's kind of hard to source. You're going to have to import it from China or some via precarious sellers that you're going to find on eBay. Prices vary from £600 all the way up to £800. And that's a huge gap and huge margin. However, I'm going to be reviewing it at around £670, the most common price I could find online. So bear in mind that that's the price I'm reviewing this phone at, and given its competitors such as the Galaxy S9 Plus or even the Pixel 2, even the iPhone X, to see how they compare in terms of their respective price tag that you can find in your countries or in the UK, which costs around £750 as a ballpark average for those phones that I just mentioned. So let's go into the build quality and look a little bit more in depth of it and talk about all the different features that it offers. So first let's talk about the build quality of this phone. So as you can see, the display goes pretty much all the way from one edge to the other. That includes from the sides to the top and bottom, which is really accomplished by the fact that I've removed the front facing camera at the top. Now you might be wondering, where is that famous front facing camera? Well, it comes up like this. And yes, as you can hear, and you can see me in the background, it has a slight little noise. I'll do it again. And that's pretty awesome. Now in terms of the actual speed of it, as you can see, that was done in real time. It doesn't take that long in order to operate. And which means that you've got a fantastic screen to enjoy over here. Now you might be wondering, why on earth would I need that screen? Why would I not need a notch or let's say an 18:9, a normal 18:9 screen? Simply because if you're going to be using it for scrolling the net, or even let's say gaming, let's say PUBG or something like that, then you can enjoy it in its full glory and not have to worry about any sort of bezels. It looks fantastic, and when it comes to gaming, it's absolutely beautiful. So aside from the obvious, the phone is pretty fingerprint. It's a bit of a fingerprint magnet at the back. However, when it is absolutely clean, it's got a nice reflective glow to it, and it looks really beautiful. Underneath, you've got a USB-C jack, and you've got a dual SIM adapter, which you can use for different regions. And it is an internationally unlocked phone, so I had no problems using it in the UK. You've got a 3.5mm jack at the top, woo! So they haven't done an Apple or a Huawei. And at the side, you've got a few buttons. Now you've got the on and off button on the right, volume rocker as well on the right, but on the left-hand side, you've got a dedicated Jovi button. Now this Jovi button is, in all honesty, something of a bit of a gimmick, but I'll get into that in just a bit in terms of the software. Now, I also want to mention, in terms of the overall build quality, that you can unlock this phone with your fingerprint, but you might be wondering, where on earth is that fingerprint? Because I couldn't see the fingerprint sensor anyway. Well, fret not, it is actually built into the display. Now in terms of the overall speed of the fingerprint sensor, I can't say it's all really fast, and like it doesn't compare to my OnePlus 5T, but in terms of the operation, it does work as you'd intend. However, sometimes I did find myself redoing the fingerprint sensor, and more so, you had to hit it in the exact part of the screen, so I can't do it any way around it. I need to press exactly on it. Now that is quite innovative, because there's not many smartphones out there in the market right now that actually have in-display fingerprint sensors. And it's something I saw at Synaptics back at CES 2018 in January, and I was really impressed by it. And it's nice to see that actually Vivo have incorporated it in the Nex S as well. It's one of very few phones that actually have it, and the way that they've integrated it works really well. So I have no problems in unlocking the phone. However, if I'm comparing apples to apples, so let's say I'm comparing it to current flagship smartphones unlock a lot quicker. I would say at the exception of the iPhone X, which requires Face ID, which sometimes can be temperamental and requires you an extra actuation, which means you have to power it on and swipe it up in order to unlock. But nevertheless, the Nex S has this inbuilt fingerprint sensor, and I can see this being the next generation way of unlocking phones. Now, I did say I would get into that software bit, and I must say it is one of the fundamental flaws of this phone. Now, the phone runs on FunTouch OS 4. That is Vivo's own Android overlay, and I must say it is riddled with loads of Chinese bloatware. Now, you can see I've pretty much removed a lot of them, installed my own apps that I want. However, you're going to have to deal with all of this bloatware in order to really enjoy the phone. Worse still, it's all in Chinese, which means that it's not made for the international market, even though it's sold and works internationally. Is the fact that you need to install Google Play services, and Google Play services are not easy to install. I'll link down in the description below threads I found, such as on XDA developers, which go through the steps that you need to do in order to install Google Play services, which then allow you to install the normal set of Android apps. But that aside, after you've installed that, I just found the whole UI and the whole experience a bit too iPhone-esque, too much I want to be an iPhone type thing. So you can see over here, if you swipe up from the top, if you hold it a little bit, it comes with your recent apps, very much like the iPhone does. If you swipe up from the right over here, you can see a very familiar looking kind of control pod, which again is taken something from the iPhone. At least it's not Android at all. It doesn't look like an Android phone at all. It's not to say I've got a major complaint with it, it's just the fact that I just don't like it being used, and the huge amount of overlay that's on this phone just makes it a little bit unintuitive. Even in the settings menu, you've got a odd way of sorting out the things. Over here, you've got system update at the top, whilst you've got smart click and certain different smart motion things at the bottom. Why couldn't it just be in a alphabetical order, or a little bit better organized, or allow me, the user, to actually organize it? So really, the software lets it down. It can be customized like pretty much every Android device, but that Jovi button I talked about over there is also useless. It's a voice assistant or AI assistant, which is pretty much used like in other, like the Bixby used on Samsung devices. I just find it pretty useless, and I would really love to remap that button. Unfortunately, that's not the case, and you're stuck with Jovi. And if Jovi is in Chinese, which you can see is all written in Chinese, even though the phone is set to English, it is pretty useless, other than the fact that if you do speak fluent Chinese. So that's my complaint in terms of the software. Now, aside the rather unintuitive software, there is no problems in terms of speed. This phone houses the Snapdragon 845 processor, which at the time of making this video is up there with the flagship smartphones like the Galaxy S9 and what have you. It has 8 GB of RAM, which is plenty for multitasking capabilities. In terms of the other specifications, Wi-Fi has got dual band 2.4 and 5 GHz bands. It's got Bluetooth 5.0. In terms of audio quality, both from the speaker and the 3.5mm jack, I had absolutely no problems, and it's perfectly acceptable for your normal music listening. If you're an audiophile, of course, you're going to want a external DAC, but I had no real problems listening to it personally. And then I also want to mention in terms of the overall charge speed. Now, I couldn't get this to fast charge because the charger that came with it was a Chinese charger, and the charger that I used in terms of UK charger, like the OnePlus charger, the Dash charger, didn't fast charge this phone, so it took an absolute decade to fully charge this phone. But in terms of battery life, it actually lasts relatively well, a full day's usage. Now, battery life is one of those things that you have to assess it in terms of your own usage. If you're playing Pokemon Go like me, and yes, I do still play it, then it's going to drain pretty badly. However, if you're going to be using it just to browse Facebook and then watch some occasional YouTube videos, and then, I don't know, call your friends or your other half, then it'll last you a full day's of usage without having to recharge it. So no real complaint. It's not like a standout in terms of battery life, but nor is it a terrible phone in terms of overall battery life. It pretty much competes, and it's pretty much average in comparison to other flagship phones out there on the market. Now, another thing I do want to mention, however, is the fact that it lacks any micro SD card expansion slot, so you cannot expand the memory, and also it's got no IP rating, which means it's not a waterproof phone. I don't think there's been a teardown for this phone yet, so I can't confirm if it can actually be dropped in a pool, but yet it doesn't have the IP rating. For example, OnePlus's 5T and the 6 have those capabilities, however they're not advertised as IP67 or IPX7 or whatever it might be, whereas the Samsung Galaxy devices are. So Just bear that in mind, it's not waterproof, so that's one of the negative points. And finally, also it has got no NFC, which I found it a little bit strange given the fact that contactless payments are really the way forwards now, especially on smartphones. You see a lot of people tapping in, at least on the tube in the UK and around the world, especially in the US. And it's just surprising that this doesn't have NFC capabilities. I'm not sure why this was left out. So if you want to make contactless payments via your phone, you can't do that because it doesn't have NFC. Now we get on to the interesting part of this review, is the camera. Not only the front selfie camera, but the rear facing camera as well. Now the camera that's on the Vivo Nex S is a 12 megapixel f1.8 sensor, and at the front you've got a pop-up 8 megapixel f2.0. And at the back, the secondary sensor is a 5 megapixels f2.4 depth sensor, so it's got dual cameras around the back. Full specs will be in the description below, so make sure you check them out. Now, before getting to the camera comparisons between my OnePlus 5T, I know that's last year's model, but that's just my phone I have, I would like to mention the video quality. Now the video quality was absolutely fine, however, in terms of the overall frames per second, it was only able to record at 30 frames per second, which in this day and age I don't quite understand. Even this video I'm making right now is 60 FPS. So recordings even at 4K, 1080p, 720, they're all at 30 FPS, which does limit it in terms of fast moving objects. If however you're going to be just, I don't know, filming something that's not moving, then you won't have a problem whatsoever, but at that point why wouldn't you just take a picture? So it's just something I would like to notice before going into the video, the whole comparison. So talking about video, let's go into that comparison and talk about how it compares between the 5T. So here you go is a video of the 5T, and then it's going to be followed off by the Vivo Nex S. Now you're able to see in the two video clips that the 5T was a lot smoother. Now it might be a little bit upscaled due to video rendering, because I video render at 60 FPS, but the Vivo Nex S just wasn't as smooth when I was looking at it on my PC. One other thing I'd like to notice was the audio quality. The audio quality of the Nex S wasn't that great. It was a bit too tinny, a little bit too closed. It didn't capture really the cyclist going past. But now moving on to the still camera quality from the rear facing cameras and the front facing cameras. So in terms of the rear facing cameras, you'll be able to see here a set of pictures. The first ones I've taken without HDR and the second with HDR. So first you can see the 5T taken without HDR, and then you can see the one with the Vivo Nex S. The difference is absolutely clear. Not only is the image a lot lighter, the dynamic range is great, and in terms of the overall sharpness, it's absolutely fantastic. Whack on HDR and you've got slightly better reproduction on the skyline. Moving into another scene, you'll be able to see this, the greens on the foliage around the trees are just a lot better on the Vivo Nex S versus the 5T. The 5T is a highly respected phone, should I add, but the Vivo Nex S really does a better job. With HDR enabled, you can see again that skyline coming out a little bit, but yet with HDR it looks a little bit too vivid and a little bit too fake. Moving into a selfie shot, you'll be able to see over here, however, that the Vivo Nex S just doesn't really compare to the OnePlus 5T. The 5T produces a much more accurate color reproduction, and even though it's a little bit blurred in the background, the Vivo Nex S's example just felt a little bit washed out and just lacking that detail. So that pop-up camera is cool, but if you're going to be really taking selfies all the time, then the Vivo Nex S probably isn't going to be for you. In terms of portrait mode, I compared that as well, and I must say that the quality was average on both, but much better on the Vivo Nex S. I did, however, find it to slightly overemphasize natural skin tones and made me look a little bit too artificial, and that is with all beauty modes and what have you disabled. The same case was in low light, and I felt that in low light conditions the Vivo Nex S came out on top, but yet sometimes felt a little bit artificial. This isn't probably the best example in this this pond shot. However, when I compared it in low light, looking down at like a very dark street, I felt that the Vivo Nex S was actually pretty capable of doing a good job in low light conditions. Now, how does this compare to your average day flagship phone, which is the 5T is no longer a flagship phone because it's last year's model? Well, the Nex S really does keep up the pace in comparison to the Galaxy S9, the Pixel 2, and even the iPhone X. When I say even the iPhone X is lower than those two phones I just mentioned. But the Vivo Nex S really does a great job. However, it is beaten by the flagship phones, Android flagship phones, but it's not to say it's a bad phone, it's just very, very good, just not as good as those phones I've mentioned. So for example, the Huawei P20 Pro will be the one which really comes out on top in comparison to the rest. The Pixel 2 probably under that, Galaxy S9, S9 Plus as well. Under that, you've probably got the Vivo Nex S. So it is very good in comparison to other flagship phones out there. It's just not the best, even though it has a dual rear-facing camera and a cool pop-up camera. So that's pretty much it in terms of the camera quality and just my overall opinions about it. Now, let's bring this in and reel it in for the overall verdict. Now, in my opinion, the Vivo Nex S is a great, innovative phone. It's fantastic, it looks beautiful, it feels great, the camera is good, both in terms of the front camera and the rear camera. It's got all flagship performance. However, there's several things that really let it down in order for me to fully recommend it. First of all is the absolutely horrible software which is on top. I really don't like FunTouch OS, and if it had pure stock Android with all the Google Play services installed by default, then I think Vivo would have a much stronger chance of really penetrating the international market rather than just concentrating on the Chinese market. That dedicated Jovi button also is really annoying. I'd really like it either to be removed completely or to be remapped to whatever I like. So for example, launching my favorite apps would be a great little feature here. Then you've got the availability and where you can source it from. Currently, the sellers that are selling it aren't ones that you might not trust, your everyday seller. It's not like an Amazon seller or something. You'll have to go on eBay, and the warranty system might be a little bit dubious if you're buying from those sources. Or if you're importing it from China, then you might have to pay very hefty import fees. So that's really the only disadvantages of this phone. It's got everything that you'd want on a flagship phone, and it's very, very cool and it's very eye-catching. That pop-up camera gets everyone by surprise. Whoever I showed was like, whoa, that's awesome. It's first of its kind, and I'd love to see other manufacturers adopt that. I just wish the Vivo concentrated on the software and made this phone really internationally available with the Google Play services installed, or even had a stock Android version of the phone, and I think that would be an absolute killer phone. So for that reason, I can't really recommend the phone. It's not widely available and it's quite hard to find. But if you have the opportunity to try it, or if you speak fluent Chinese, then I think you will actually like this phone. On a final note, I do want to mention something, that the stock launcher can't be changed without a Vivo account. For a Vivo account, you need to contact Vivo's support page in order to get that, and you need a Chinese number. Vivo can supply that, however it's a bit of a faff. So just going based on what I just said in terms of FunTouch OS and in order to customizing that, I felt quite locked down in the fact that I had to contact Vivo support in order to try and unlock the stock launcher. And that's saying something about the phone. So there we go, guys. I've been Totally Dubbed. This has been the Vivo Nex S. It's a beautiful phone, just got a few flaws that I mentioned. Alright, if you've liked this video, make sure you give it a like, subscribe, favourite and share as always helps, and let me know in the comments below what you think of this phone or what the future of innovation is in terms of smartphone technology. Alright guys, I've been Totally Dubbed. Take care and bye bye.